What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Taylor Hinton Speaks His Mind, the number one online health and fitness podcast in the world. It is March 23rd, 2026. Beautiful Monday. And it's been nice. Yesterday, it felt, not necessarily felt like summer, but it sure looked like summer. I told Angela by the end of this month, there's probably going to be at least one day where we have some summer type weather. I'm talking t shirts and shorts. I'm betting on it. I think it's going to happen. You guys know the deal on these calls. This is where our clients can pop on, ask us any questions that they have about their training, their nutrition, their vision, everything that they're trying to build right now, how to establish a better routine, anything at all. And until we have a client that pops in, what I wanted to focus my energy on for today is sharing with you a few videos that I have of myself and breaking down the difference between stimulus and fatigue. I think this is a really important cue that a lot of people undervalue and probably misunderstand completely. I truly believe that when you can discern between the difference between stimulating muscle tissue versus just simply building fatigue in your body, then you're going to be able to optimize your time in the gym and therefore optimize your progress overall. A lot of people are lifting heavy weights, they have good technique, but the way that they're moving the weight and where they're placing emphasis at each stage of the one given exercise, including where they're focusing their energy in the repetition, each repetition that you perform of any given exercise has areas for you to maximize stimulus and optimize fatigue, i.e., lowering fatigue as much as possible. Now, before I share these videos with you, I want to break down what these both mean. Stimulus. Stimulus simply means your ability to apply tension and physical exertion to the muscle that drives progress. So that means that when you are doing an exercise, there are different movements or leverage points in the exercise that are going to emphasize how much tension you can place on the muscle. That's really good because when you can optimize for tension slash stimulus, then you are making your body adapt at a higher level. Fatigue can be confused with stimulus very easily because fatigue is very simple. Fatigue is how tired am I from this exercise? And people who are a little newer or misinformed might think that the more fatigued they are or the more tired that they get during their exercise, the more progress they're making. And that is not necessarily true. There is a correlation though, because if you're going to stimulate the muscle, you're going to have to work at a level of intensity that will inevitably make you more fatigued. So you can't avoid fatigue. It's going to happen. It's part of the human experience when it comes to developing your body physically. But you don't have to build incredulous amounts of fatigue to get incredible results. In fact, you can optimize for stimulus and minimize for fatigue to yield the greatest net benefit, allowing you to continue pushing yourself harder for more days, weeks, and months at a time before you experience, quote, burnout. And so let's get into what that looks like. One thing, just, you know what, just before I do, I'm going to share these videos here. But just before I do, I want to share a philosophical perspective that that I and other health professionals share, and that is stretch mediated hypertrophy. It's a fancy way of saying you are going to build the most muscle in most cases when you are stretching the muscle under tension. So, a lot of people, a good visualization for this is doing a bicep curl. We can all see a bicep curl happening in our head, so let's use that. A lot of people, when they're starting, or maybe, 10, 20 years ago, they worked with a trainer, or maybe you're working out with your best friend. You're just getting into the gym and your friend is big and strong, or they're lean and fit, or whatever terminology you want to use to describe the physique that you like and have aspirations of building. And that individual showing you how to do that bicep curl in the example we're using right now might tell you to squeeze hard at the top. So you're lowering the weight under control, but when you bring the weight up, it's really important that at the top you squeeze your bicep really, really hard. That is fundamentally backwards from stretch mediated hypertrophy. Mediation meaning that that is the application we're using. Stretch being when the muscle is at the lengthened position. And hypertrophy just simply means muscle building. That's the type of exercise that most of us are going to be doing. So if we're focusing on stretch mediated hypertrophy, if we know that in most cases, stretch mediated hypertrophy is what's going to provide us with the most stimulus, then we should optimize for that part of the exercise. Meaning that in the bicep curl example, it's not about squeezing really hard at the top, but it's actually the opposite. It's about making sure that you're getting a lot of tension at the bottom of the exercise when the weight is essentially down by your leg, where your bicep is in its most stretched position. So I'm going to share a few videos for you and break down what this looks like visually, because not everybody is doing bicep curls. It's also not the most optimized exercise that you can do for full body stimulation. So let's start off here with the hip thrust. We've got the hip thrust machine. We'll mute because we don't care to hear that. And we'll skip to when I actually get set up. So you'll notice here, before I even, and this is a little bit of a detour from the topic at hand, but I think it's valuable for us to share. You'll notice that when I'm getting set up, I'm taking my time. I'm really being deliberate about where my foot placement is, where my back is sitting on the machine. And then once I'm in the position that I feel is going to be most optimal for me to see the most results, from there, and what I'll do real quick for Instagram folk is, hello, Instagram folk, is I'm not going to accept somebody joining the call on Zoom, on Instagram, but I'm going to share you so you guys can see the video too. So once I'm in position here, I'm then taking a few breaths. This is me relaxing, getting in a position, visualizing the exercise for a brief moment, and then getting myself in a position. I'm immediately starting the descent on this exercise. And from here, what you can see at the bottom, this here is when I am stretched, because of course with the hip thrust, the target muscle is our glutes. So the stretch position is when my hips are as low as possible. If you can imagine my glutes at the bottom of this exercise, I'm getting that full stretch. Okay. Aubrey, I'm going to finish this this video here real quick. And then any questions that you have, I'll let you unmute. Go ahead and share a win inside the chat. Okay. You can put in the chat too if you have anything. Yeah, you have to ask a question. You know the deal. I'll get there in a sec. So at the bottom here, this is where I'm at the most stretch position. This is where I want to place the most emphasis and my energy of this exercise. And then at the top, we'll pause there too. This is the contracted position. This is when the muscles are shortened. This is when my glutes are squeezing really hard. And now that muscle, those muscle fibers are at the shortened position. This is where you're probably feeling it the most during the exercise, because you feel that hard squeeze. This is where it's most difficult to hold the weight. It'd be very hard for me to hold 500 pounds sitting up here in this position, but it's much easier to hold that weight down at the bottom position. So you can technically lift a lot more weight or bear a lot more weight at the bottom position where your muscles are most stretched. And that's great because that's where we want to place that emphasis. So let's go through the whole range of motion. Slow, controlled negatives, gentle pause at the bottom, aggressive thrust to the top. As you can see, I'm spending a lot more time on the lowering phase. It takes me much more time to lower the weight than it does for me to thrust the weight back up. Mentally, I'm imagining that every time I'm thrusting the weight up, for me, I'm just resetting. I don't want to spend a bunch of time and energy on the positive part of this exercise, the positive being the squeezing back up, the shortening of the muscle. I'm not trying to make that time consuming or burning a lot of energy. And the more time I take to get back to the top, the more energy I'm burning. And I know that I'm getting the most out of this exercise in the stretch position. So of course, I'm going to spend more time slowly lowering the weight down and pausing at the bottom slightly so that I can really emphasize the stimulus. The fatigue is being built when I thrust the weight back up. I'm still getting stimulus. It's not that the positive is completely useless. There's benefit to it. There's power and strength that's being built there, but there's more muscle being built when I lower the weight back down. So if building muscle or building shape or having bigger glutes is a priority for you, then you should be lowering that weight slowly under control. And as you can tell, I'm slowly lowering the weight down and I'm spending less time on the positive. If I were to sit at the top of this exercise and hold that squeeze up at the top, there is some stimulus that's happening, but the ratio of stimulus to fatigue is much worse. I'm getting way more fatigue sitting at the top than I am sitting at the bottom. Of course, I don't want to just stay stagnant in one position. I don't want to stay isolated. I do want to keep moving to get all my repetitions. And I do want to optimize for that negative control. I want to get as many negative controls as I can with that really heavy weight. So I'm going to continue repeating that thrusting back up. And I'm, again, mentally, I'm not thrusting back up because this part is the hardest and it's the most difficult. I'm thrusting back up because mentally I'm like, I need to reset. I need to get another nice slow negative in. That's where the emphasis is. That's where we're getting the most muscle being built and the less fatigue being built up. So covering that video, we'll go to the next one here in a second, but I just want to see what Aubrey's got for me here. No questions as for now. I'll try to think. Okay, well, you have to have a question. So if you need a second or two, that's totally fine. Rules of jumping on the call, got to have a question. Win is weekly average steps are above goal. Weekly average screen time is down almost 2 hours from what it was previously, and stop snacking off the kids' plates. That's gangster. I love that. Congratulations. Good stuff. Okay, so that is it. So you got to come up with a question here. So that's it for that exercise. Let's go to our next one here. What do I have next? We've got the leg extension. I'm going to open that one up. And I'll stop my share and I'll share once again. We're going to go to that one. Perfect. Good. And just for my own personal organization, I'm going to delete that. There we go. So you guys should be able to see my leg extension here. I'm going to get myself set up. So again, the whole setup, super valuable, super important. Let's get into the right position here. So I already had this machine set up properly the way that I wanted it, looks like. But again, kicking out hard and aggressive, that's the reset. I'm trying to get the weight up to the top because I want to emphasize that slow negative control. Kicking up hard, and then immediately, once I get to the top of that shortened position, because again, down here at the bottom, this is where my quad is the most stretched. At the top, that's where it's most contracted. It's shortened here. This is where I'm building fatigue. I'm not getting more out of this exercise by pulsing at the top or holding this at the top. In the immediate short term, the feedback that you're getting is that this is hard. This is burning. So that makes us believe naturally that if this hurts the most and this is where I'm getting challenged the most, then I must be building the most muscle here. But the data just doesn't support that. The good thing about everything I'm sharing with you is that this isn't up for interpretation. This isn't my personal anecdotal evidence. This isn't my bro science. This is the information that's been provided to us through clinical studies where they put on little electrode devices onto the muscles and they can objectively tell that there is more stimulation happening at the bottom of the exercise when you're slowly lowering and stretching than there is at the top. So when you watch me doing this, you'll see again, I'm spending more time slowly lowering the weight and then I'm kicking up aggressive to reset. You'll also notice that at the top of this exercise, I'm not holding it. I'm actually trying to immediately get back into my negative controlled descent as quickly as I can. So slow, controlled negative, kick up hard, and immediately start that descent. I'm not wasting any time at the top. At the top, I'm building more fatigue. It feels like it hurts more at the top, but what I'm doing, if I were to sit there and try to squeeze at the top, is I'm really just taking away energy from the negative, meaning that if I can get, say, 12 reps with that heavy weight by doing it with my method, if I were to spend a lot of time holding the squeeze at the top, I might only be able to get 10 reps because I'm just building fatigue, making myself more tired at the top of that exercise. Let's go to another video. Let's get another example here and see what we got. And I have lost there we go. Next, this is a novel exercise being done. There's probably a name for it. I don't necessarily have one. I'm going to get my screen shared. Don't you worry, everybody. This is, I think I did this in the front rack position. Yeah. We're going to call this Smith machine front rack heel elevated squats or sissy squats. Front rack Smith machine sissy squats. Sissy squats just means that we're really emphasizing knee traveling over the toes. And by nature, you'll notice that my heels come up off the ground. That is counterintuitive to your normal squat pattern. But with this one, we're not going to be able to lift as much weight because we're not firmly planted on the ground, but we're able to create way more tension, especially at the stretch position because our heels are off the ground. The more that my hamstring can cover my calf, the better the stretch is going to be. So way down here at the bottom, I'm getting an insane stretch. I don't have a lot of weight given my personal strength and what I can lift with a normal squat, but I don't need to have lots and lots of weight as long as I can create a lot of tension in the muscle and still hit muscular failure, or at least get very close to it. So at the top here, the weight is bearing straight down vertically towards the floor. Gravity is pulling this weight down. There is no tension at the top here. I'm relaxed. I could sit here for hours, maybe not hours. You know what I'm saying? I could sit down at this spot for a very long time, and I'd get bored before I'd get tired doing this. I could fully extend my knees and lock out and squeeze my quads really hard at the top, but that does little in comparison to me doing this with no weight because the weight is stacked over top of my joints, my shoulders, my hips, my knees, and my ankles. Those joints are what's bearing the weight. It's not the muscle. The muscle can stay perfectly relaxed. This is just my skeleton holding the weight up. But at the bottom, if I had no muscle, if this was just a skeleton, then this weight would fold my bones in half. I have to stay here. The only way I'm able to maintain this position and my integrity with my form is by engaging my quads and of course all my other muscles too. But obviously the target here is the quad. So at the bottom, massive stretch, a lot of tension on the muscle, and there's less fatigue. But as I squeeze up to the top, if I were to lock my legs out, I would have a lot of fatigue being built up and not much muscle being built. That's why at the top here, I'm not locking my knees out. I'm just getting up to the top to reset. So let's watch this in full speed. I'm not really spending any time at the top, maybe just finishing my breath, taking another breath, slow controlled negative, gentle pause at the bottom, and then exploding back up to reset. I don't want to waste any time standing back up. I don't want to waste any time locking my legs out at the top and squeezing hard. I'm just standing back up to reset and then focusing all my energy on that slow negative. Now, this being my first set, I only really started building a ton of fatigue around my last rep. As you can tell, the weight's moving pretty smooth until the very last rep, it starts to slow down a little bit. So again, the bottom of the exercise is where we're building the most muscle. That's where we're going to focus our energy. Let's get into our next video. Next one we have is going to be the pull-up. I'll pull that up here. Pull up. My pull-up video. Okay. Don't be a dork, Taylor. Nobody cares. Let's see. Still waiting for that question to come in, Miss Aubrey. Okay. So the pull-up. Let me ask you guys, and you're just going to have to trust that you're listening and doing this with me because not everybody is here live. You're watching this and listening to this later. Where am I building the most fatigue? Is it at the top or is it at the bottom? Where am I building the most fatigue? Now, this video I'm realizing right now is probably not the best example of the whole stretch mediated hypertrophy and slow pause at the bottom. I'm remembering now this video is one that I did just trying to get as many reps as I can. So I'm not necessarily optimizing for muscle growth right now. I'm really just trying to test myself to see how many I can do. I think I got 17. But where am I building the most fatigue? Aubrey's here. Aubrey can answer that question. Aubrey, that can be your question of the day. I guess I'm posing the question to you. Put in the chat or you can unmute. What is building the most fatigue? Is it when I'm squeezing at the top or when I'm stretched at the bottom? And we'll wait for Aubrey. We'll just,
Based off of the entire chat so far, to be the bottom,
is
right?
where I'm building the most fatigue.
Yeah,
Nope. It's at the top.
at the top.
At the top. So at the top, this is where, and how we know where we're building the most fatigue across the board. When you're building the most fatigue, when you are contracting the muscle, when the muscles are being squeezed hard, when the muscle's in its shortened position. So for the pull up, we're targeting the lats, but you're really getting bicep and your traps and your mid back. Everything is really working hard here. It's a compound exercise. So you're going to get multiple muscle groups, multiple joints working together. But this at the top is where, imagine like it's easier maybe to envision the bicep. Is the bicep at the shortened position? Is it contracted here? Or is it at the shortened position and contracted down here? So bit of a trick question because ideally we're contracting throughout the entire time. There's a eccentric contraction and there's a concentric contraction. Concentric would be closed muscle. Muscle is shortened. So the bicep is shortened position here. Just like if I was flexing my bicep, it's the same thing. I'm holding my body up here, flexing right here, biceps at the shortened position, lengthened position when I extend my elbow, when I straighten my arm, now my bicep is lengthened. Same thing with my lats. My lats are lengthened at the bottom here, and they are contracted and shortened at the top here. So when the muscle is at the shortened position, that's when you're building the most fatigue. You are minimizing stimulus at the shortened position. But to do the repetitions that you have to perform, you have to get the shortened and the lengthened position to complete the rep. So at the top, I'm just pulling myself up to get to the top. The worst thing I could do here, the absolute worst thing that I could do for this exercise is if I were to sit at the top of this exercise and hold and squeeze real hard. Again, same thing as the bicep example at the beginning before Aubrey got on. We talked about the bicep, and people will tell you when you're doing your curls, really squeeze at the top. No, if you feel it more, it's burning more, it hurts more, but that is more fatiguing than it is stimulating. At the bottom, we're getting more stimulus and less fatigue. So if we were doing this to build muscle and not doing it for as many reps as I can, you would see me pull up hard and aggressive. Once I get to the top, I'm not going to hold here. I would immediately start my descent, and it would be a slow, controlled negative down to the bottom, maybe 2 to 3 seconds of lowering that my body weight, the weight in this case, lowering my body weight down to slowly stretch the muscle out and get to the very bottom. The lengthened position is where we build muscle. The shortened position is where we are building fatigue. So now let's do another one. Let's see, I've got another one right here. And Aubrey, this is the last video that I have as an example. So you better get this right. Pressure's on. Let's see. Let's get the, oh my gosh. There we go. There we go. So here we have a dip. It's a dip variation. I put the band around my neck so I can make it a little more challenging here. Now, Aubrey, you're going to tell us, where am I building the most fatigue? Now, remember, the shortened position when the muscle is squeezing is where we build the most fatigue. We've got this position and we have this position at the top. Which one is building more fatigue, at the top or at the bottom?
It feels like a trick question. Bottom?
Nope. This is where I'm
Why?
stretched. This is where the muscle is being stretched at the bottom. So this is the least fatiguing but most stimulating. That's optimal. Same thing with the chest. This is a chest exercise too. But at the top, and I don't know if I get that last rep, I don't.
Okay, well, if I was looking at the chest, I would have said, wait, never mind. I don't know.
So right here, arms are straightened out, targeting tricep. This is also chest. This is also shoulder. I love doing exercises where I'm hitting multiple muscle groups. Way more efficient way. What's going on, Nick? So this is the shortened position. This is where the most fatigue is happening. This is the bottom position. This is where the stretch is. This is where the most stimulus is going to happen. So at the bottom, more stimulus. At the top, more fatigue. And another little hack you could use is watching my technique, because you'll see that where do I what takes longer for me to do? Lower my body or press back up to the top? Which one? Just watch, Aubrey. Which one takes more time?
Lowering.
Yeah, exactly. I know you're nervous to answer now. Oh for 2. Um, yes, I'm spending way more time lowering my body weight down because I know that when I'm lowering my body, when I'm stretching that muscle out, that's when I'm getting the most stimulus. So I'm going to optimize for that lowering phase. Shortened at the top, shortened time. I just want to reset. Just get me back up to the top so I can get another rep. And then now that I'm at the top, here's the fun part: slow, controlled negative. That's where I'm building the most muscle there. So here's a final thing I'll add in here that's a bit of a bonus for us is so that was a really hard rep. Obviously, as I'm doing more reps, I'm building more fatigue. I'm getting more tired. You're gonna, like I said at the beginning of the video, we're building fatigue when we exercise all the time, no matter what. It's unavoidable. But what we're trying to do is maximize the stimulus to fatigue ratio by controlling the negative as best as we can, because that's where we build the most muscle. If this is the rep, let's see. Yeah, so this rep here is my last attempt, or no, I think it's the next one after this. Yeah, I barely get that one. I know getting this last rep is going to take everything that I possibly have, but I'm still going to go for it. I could just stop here because realistically, after watching how challenging that last one is, it'd be very easy for me to say, there's no way I'm getting the next rep. Why don't I just stop here? Well, I still want to try to reach that muscular failure. So I haven't yet reached it because I completed that rep. So I haven't hit failure yet, technically. I'm going to go for this next one, even though I'm pretty confident I'm not going to get it. I'm still going to give it everything that I have, pushing as hard as I can. The reality is, I might have been able to get that rep if I started cheating by maybe opening up my elbows more to get more chest, which is a bigger, stronger muscle. Maybe by like using my knees and driving my knees up to get a bit of momentum and a bit of swinging here. I could have completed that last rep. But what is that going to do for my next 2 sets? Because I'm not done. I'm just getting started. So if I'm forcing myself to get beyond failure on my very first set, that's going to be at the cost of being able to get more quality negative reps on my second and third and fourth set following this one. So yeah, I'm pushing till I hit failure, but I'm not going to push beyond failure by cheating the rapper. You could technically have a partner grab your feet and I could push off of my partner's hands to help me assist myself up to the top. But if I'm getting, I don't know how many reps this is. Let's say it's 10. Let's imagine I'm supposed to get 4 sets of 10 here. And I went beyond failure on set one to barely get 10, or maybe I pushed hard to get 11 or 12. I'm so fatigued after this first set. My 2 minute recovery just won't be enough for me to get another 10 on my next. So I would rather fail at 9.5 without building this last rep here. This last attempt is so fatiguing. Like, even that one was very fatiguing. This effort here, getting that's fatiguing in and of itself. But if I happen to finish that rep, I would have built so much fatigue for what? Half a repetition? We have to train smart too. Is that one half of a concentric repetition worth me missing out on 3 reps on my next set and another 3 and another 3? That one last ditch effort with shitty form to get that very last rep could have very well resulted in me missing out on another 9 quality reps throughout the rest of this exercise. So which one has more value? What's going to progress me further overall in my fitness? Is it going to be pushing super hard and getting that last rep for my ego, or calling it and saying, you know what? I have a lot more work to do. I'm going to put more energy and save that fatigue that I'm going to build up. I'm going to hit that fatigue. The fatigue is going to be the same. But if I can do another 9 reps over the course of 3 more sets, I'll take that because it's going to help me provide a lot more stimulus to the muscle. Maybe on the last set, and it's my last exercise, it's time to go home. I might go for broke. I might do that ego lift and get that very last rep that's dirty and ugly and gross. But even doing that, I have to accept the risk of I might get hurt doing that by having sloppy form. So, this is how we manage fatigue, build as much muscle as we can, and ensure that we are making as much progress as possible. It's not always push as hard as you possibly can to get your last rep, because if it's at the cost of you being able to lift more and do more repetitions down the road with your subsequent sets that you know you're going to do, it's not worth it. You're literally hindering your ability to make more progress for the sake of your ego. So be mindful of how much fatigue you're building and focus your energy, everybody, on the negative, on the eccentric component of that exercise. The beautiful thing that it does, this is something that a lot of people miss. If none of these things, happy Monday to you, brother. If none of these things are enough for you to make the switch with your training style and intensity, keep this in mind as well. When you focus on the negative component of the exercise, you're forcing yourself automatically to have better technique. Because if you're only thinking of moving the weight from point A to point B and squeezing hard at the top, then what would be the point of slowly controlling the negative? If you didn't understand or appreciate everything that I have just shared, then you could do a bicep curl with 45 pounds or 60 pounds. Because if you're just thinking about getting the weight from point A to point B and squeezing hard at the top, you can use a lot of momentum to swing a 60-pound dumbbell up to the top and then squeeze it. Because when it's up at the top, you could hold a 80-pound dumbbell sitting up here, no problem. But trying to lower 80 pounds under control, much, much harder. That leverage, and I'm pulling that weight away from my center of gravity. The further away it goes, the harder it's going to be. There's no way you're going to slowly control an 80-pound dumbbell, but you might be able to swing it up and just hold it up by your shoulder and squeeze really hard. What are we squeezing for? I could hold it here and not even use my bicep at all. In fact, I'd probably be using a lot more shoulder to keep the weight up, keep my elbow up, right? This is that shoulder flexion. So keeping my elbow up is going to squeeze that weight a lot harder than my bicep ever will. So if you're not thinking about the eccentric, you're going to you're going to value lifting more weight over having better stimulus. And when you do that, to get the stimulus required to see growth happen, you have to lift a lot more weight. And then you're going to have worse and worse form because the more weight that you lift that you can't control, the more swinging and momentum that you use. And the more swinging and momentum with heavy weights that you lose, what else also increases? Your risk to getting injured. So think about it this way. If I have to use a 60-pound dumbbell and swinging the weight up with a lot of momentum to achieve the stimulus that I want, but also build more fatigue and also increase my risk of injury, isn't that worse? Versus use this instead, a 30-pound dumbbell, whatever that number is for you. It could be 20, it could be 15, I don't know. But use a weight that you can control negatively. You're still getting all the same reps, but you're controlling that negative and pausing at the bottom. Guess what happens? That slow controlled negative makes that lighter dumbbell feel very heavy. Your muscles don't know what numbers are labeled on the dumbbell. It just knows how much stimulus and how much tension is in the muscle. So if I can create as much tension or more tension and more stimulus with less weight and use the full range of motion and do it with good form, guess what happens? The muscle is still getting stimulated, likely better than with heavier weights. You're getting strong at the end range of motion because you're not valuing weight over technique. You're now able to control it all the way down to the full stretch position. So your muscle is getting strong at that full stretch position as well as at the top. So now you're getting full muscle development, not just partial muscle development. The full muscle is being developed. You're using lighter weight and it's still as hard or more challenging than with the heavy weight. So guess what's happening? You're building more muscle, and lighter weights are safer on your joints on average. I mean, we could all agree to that. It doesn't take a study for us to use our brains and be rational and say, hey, if I lift with lighter weight, I'm going to be safer, right? Yeah. Well, the problem becomes if I lift with lighter weight, am I even going to be working out hard enough? Am I actually getting the result? Yes, you are when you control the negative. So, lighter weights protect the joints, express full range of motion, and increase stimulus. You're literally making more progress and reducing your risk of injury when you have better form, you lift with no ego, and you emphasize the stretch rather than the contraction. So that's it for today, everybody. Hope you guys got a ton of value out of this. This was the difference between stimulus versus fatigue and why we should be optimizing for the stretch phase of virtually every exercise. I'll leave you with this. There's one caveat to this, and that is the stretch versus the contraction on the tricep. The tricep muscle has been shown in studies to get a greater stimulus at the contracted position. And I just showed an example of doing dips. I still think that you should emphasize the stretch on the dip personally because you're going to be hitting a lot more chest. I use it as a chest exercise that coincidentally, supplementally also hits your tricep. That's great. But if you were doing a cable tricep pushdown, man, you in this instance, you want to squeeze hard at the top of the exercise. And when I say top, I mean where you are contracting, where the muscle is shortened. So when you press that weight down and you shorten the muscle, that's where you're going to get the most out of the tricep. So keep that in mind. Triceps are opposite, but everything else, it's the stretch position is where you're getting the most stimulus. We got a question that just popped up on Instagram. What's up, Raven? We got Bish Trevor. What's up? Is that supposed to be Bitch Trevor? Or is that just your Bishop? Maybe is your last name? I don't know. Sorry if that was offensive. Bish Trevor. Nick says, does progressive overload matter then or increase reps or weight? I think there's a bit of a spelling error there. Does progressive overload matter maybe more than or increase reps or weight? So I'll try to answer as best I can, given I think there's maybe a word missing or some spelling errors or something. Progressive overload is the one and only way that we are making progress in the gym. And you can achieve progressive overload by a few different methods. You can achieve it by either the easiest, most straightforward way, maybe not easiest physically, but the most straightforward way. The most straightforward way, yeah. So all things, the most straightforward way is to add more weight. The next one would be add more repetitions. The next one would be add more sets. The next one would be slower negatives. The next one may be shortened rest periods, right? These are all different methods that you can use to achieve progressive overload. Progressive overload simply means, can I do this same exercise but next week, but make it more challenging? How can I make this exercise, the same exercise, more challenging next week? You can either increase the weight, increase the sets, increase the reps, decrease the rest, increase the time under tension or the negative control. So instead of controlling it for 3 seconds, maybe you control it for 4 seconds. A couple other little trick ways that you could do it. You could do rest pause sets. So a rest pause may be that you do your 10 reps and you've been doing 10 reps to failure and you just can't seem to lift anymore. Well, take a 10-second rest after completing 10 reps. Then pick up the weight and go to failure once again. Maybe that's only 2 or 3 more reps. Maybe it's 4 or 5, doesn't matter. If you drop the weight for 10 seconds, shake your arms out for a sec, and then even just getting one more rep. Guess what you just did? You just did 11 instead of 10, right? That 10-second break gives you enough just to relax the muscle briefly, but not enough for you to start entering that full relaxation and rest period. So it's kind of tricking your body. If it's, think of it this way, if you're resting for less than 10 seconds, your body thinks that you're doing it as just a consecutive rep, 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 rep. Okay. Um, Good point. So is any particular more important than the other, or are they all equal? I would say that, I mean, it's hard to say. It's a bit of a loaded question. Any one of them is going to achieve progressive overload. Which one is better? It probably depends on you, how much, you know, muscle contraction you're able to achieve in that particular muscle. what feels better for you. Um, the most objective way, the one that you can definitely be like, oh, I am 100% making more progress, is if all things are the same except the weight has increased. That's just something that you can't necessarily do every single week. It's probably the hardest to continue progressing because if you could just simply add 5 pounds every week, then we'd all be bicep curling, 500-pound dumbbells at one point. Um, so two different points here when you ask, do you recommend training to failure or consistency? Both. I mean, they're two different points. You should train to failure or at least within 1 to 2 repetitions of failure um, to achieve progressive overload. If you're dumbbell curling, we're going to keep using that example because it's easy for everyone to visualize. If you're dumbbell curling 20 pounds and you're doing 10 reps week after week after week after week and you can do 15, what the fuck are we doing? Why are we not going to 15? Your body can do more, and you know that doing more means that you're going to get better results. So go to 15. But if your program is designed for you to only do 10 reps, you're able to do 15 with that weight, with that 20-pound dumbbell. Well, then that means you should be able to do 25 and still be able to get at least 10 reps, right? So what we would typically do is we would start by trying to lift more weight. If we can't lift any more weight, can we do one more repetition? If we can't do one more repetition, is it time for us to adjust the program and increase the sets? So it's instead of doing 3 sets of 10, you're doing 4 sets of 10. Because when you take a full like 2 minute break, you'll be able to do more repetitions again. Even if it's 3 sets of 10 forever and then you have a program change, now it's 4 sets of 10, but on your fourth set you only get five, you've still added another 5 reps from what you were doing before. There's progressive overload that has been achieved at that point too. So it still just needs to be you need to train within 1 to 2 reps of failure at the very least. And if you wanted to, really flirt with failure, then don't do it on your first set. Kind of like how I explained earlier. On my first of 4 sets of dips, if I went to muscle failure on set one, I still have 3 more sets I'm supposed to perform at. And the closer you get to failure, the more fatigue you're building. Particularly that last rep where you barely get your very last rep out. Cool, you got the last rep, but at what cost? Is it at the cost of not being able to fully recover before your next set? And now instead of 10, you can only get 6 reps? And now you've just built more fatigue with another 6, of course, because we're always building fatigue. You can't eliminate that. Now that you've stacked fatigue on fatigue by going to failure on set one and then getting to failure or close to failure on set two, only getting 6 reps. Now you've got to try to recover with only a 2 minute break after doing a total of 16 reps at muscle failure, 10 out of 10 effort. Good luck getting anywhere close to 6 or 10 reps again on set three and four. So you have to manage that fine line between failure and close to failure. The problem becomes most people who are newer, even people who are more experienced, who haven't trained with somebody who's really achieved failure before. They may think that they're hitting failure without actually doing it. Failure is not when you're struggling really hard or when the weights start to slow down involuntarily or when the muscle starts to burn. None of that is failure. Failure is when, despite your greatest effort, the weight ceases to move. If the weight ceases to move with your greatest effort, and again, assuming all other things are the same, the non negotiables are I have good form, I have good tempo. Um, like you're not sacrificing your form, you're not swinging the weight around. That's not failure anymore. You haven't hit failure and then swinging the weights around because you're cheating the exercise, right? So, with good form, with good tempo, am I physically incapable of lifting this weight anymore despite my greatest effort? If the answer to that is true, you have hit failure. So getting close to that, even 1 or 2 reps before you feel that, absolute muscle failure. Progress can be made. And optimally, you won't go to failure every set because, again, of the whole idea of building too much fatigue when you still have more sets to complete. So maybe on your last set, is it worth hitting failure then? Maybe. because you don't have any more sets to do. So, can you make more progress going to failure? Yeah, but at what cost? Something to manage and be mindful of. Exactly. Okay, that's going to be it for us for right now, everybody. Thanks so much for jumping on. If you're a client, share your biggest takeaway inside of the general chat. If you are not a client and you're interested in getting some one-to-one help with coaching, just shoot me a message. I'll ask you some questions and see if we're a good fit. If all things work out, we'll schedule a call so we can meet personally, go over everything that you're struggling with, the program details and how it may or may not help you, and then make a decision together as to whether or not it makes sense to move forward. That's it. Have an amazing day. See you guys tomorrow for the support call.